Hi, welcome back. So, in the last session, we spoken about all introduction about the basic ASP.NET Core web application, sorry, web API, right? So, we spoken about controller, default controller, and app settings and program.cs and startup.cs, right? So, we would continue to just talk about the JWT generation, right? So, let's continue with that. So I would like to call out once again. So this is our users table, right? So I have created my user over here with a plain English password. But in real time scenario, basically we would hash the password and store it. So for security perspective, right? So we will talk about other fields later point of view right sometime later. So for now we actually going to cover the username and password based on which our JWT tokens are going to produce by the API, right? So so what we are going to do is in order to what's the intention behind the JWT generation, right? So the intention is very clear. So we are going to just restrict our API from unknown access or right. So unknown access means so we wanted to just keep the accessibility of the API to only authorized users. So right. So since it is API is going to communicate over the HTTP over the web. So we wanted to protect our APIs from being accessed by others or unknown uh, uh, you know uh, unknown connectivities, right? So in order to do that, we would need, so since it is ASP.NET Core web API, so we would needed a, we are going to use it the authentication, which is a middleware, right? So authentication module. So that is going to get from using Microsoft, that we are going to get help from Microsoft.mvsp.net core dot you know uh, authentication, right? So this is the namespace where a couple of providers going to help to protect our APIs, right? So again, so as we have spoken earlier about all our dependencies and any middlewares can be configured using configure methods, right? So we are going to just say that my app is needed authentication, right? So let's see how we can do that. So we have actually referred to the namespace which can provide appropriate classes. So let's go ahead and configure, right? So we would also go for authentication dot JWT pair, because since we are going to use JWT, right? So we will go and use it both. So now, as I told you, any middlewares has to be can be enabled using configure method, correct? So we would go and say that use authentication. So I wanted to use authentication for my application. So when you say this means that you're saying that my application is protective. So right. So this is in a middleware where we are going to use it on top of our application web API. So right. So now we said that this is we said that we wanted the authentication now, but you may need to just configure all the dependencies for authentication to be worked, right? So who what type of authentication and and what type of authorization. So all that can be configured. All your dependencies can be configured using configure services method, right? So So one thing you should keep in mind that whenever it comes to you know middlewares or anything that you want to inject over the application builder, so configure is the method. But whenever you want to just resolve your dependencies, or you want to just define your dependencies, configure service is the method where you want to uh, look into the as a first step for this particular purpose, right? So now we would go and again use services dot say that add authentication, right? So we are saying that add authentication, right? So add authentication, right? Config, would say that, right? So config dot default authentication schema. So where we are going to use ASP dot default schema is JWT, right? So JWT generation dot uh, yes. So one second. Yep. So JWT default bearer defaults is the one which can tell you what is the defaults authenticate schema. Config dot you know default challenge schema. So anything but the default challenge scheme, not schema. I'm sorry about that. So scheme and JWT bearer defaults dot authentication scheme, right? So these are the default options in order to say that what is the authentication uh, scheme and what is the default challenge scheme, which can actually uh, part of the authentication dependencies, right? So this is how you can configure. And so now what we need to do is we are going to say the dependency of the JWT. So we said that this is my authentication module, which we said that this is my dependency to resolve, right? So let's go ahead and continue, right? So this is the first step in now. uh, on top of this itself, we are going to say that JWT, add JWT bearer, right? Config, right? So it's a JWT token. Again, the authentication type is a bearer. That's what this name going to be, add JWT bearer, right? So in this bearer configuration, so what we are going to say is, so we say that I'm going to define a couple of properties here. So we can speak about them, when you start really defining the tokens, right? So for now I'm just going to add them as they need it. So require HTTP metadata says that it is false, we don't need it, right? So then say that config, oh no, I'm sorry, config dot save token, say that true, right? So we'll have to save the token for subsequent references of the post token generation. That's where we are saying that save token true. Then so we need to add token validation parameters. That means whenever the client submits token, right? So what parameters need to be considered in order to validate, and in order to validate the the token submitted by the client. So we would say that this is the, so let's go ahead and also add this namespace on top so that we can directly refer corresponding classes. So as you see that so we are referring Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication JWT Bearer and Microsoft Identity Model tokens. Right, these two are the ones in which we are referring the classes to, right? So token validation parameters, we are going to say what are all the validation parameters we're going to use, right? Say that one is validated issuer sign-in key is going to be true. This is nothing but the sign-in key, issuer sign-in key, which will be part of our JWT token, and we say that it's needed, and then issuer sign-in key. When we say that validate issuer sign-in key true, so we would also say that, need to say that what is sign-in key, right? So I say that it's going to be new symmetric security key of. So for now I'll keep it null. And we are going to just take the secret key from app settings, so we will get that done in some time. For now, let's define all required parameters. So next validate issuer. So for issuer, this is again another key which will be part of your JWT. For now I'll say that I don't need to be validation issue, validate issuer check, right? So validate audience false, right? So, sorry, validate issuer, right? So so again, having said that, when the client submits a JWT token along with API request, so authentication module is going to just consider what keys to be what keys to be verified before confirming it's a valid JWT token or not, right? So this is a security purpose, right? Security contract. So when you say validate issuer sign-in key true, that means I wanted the authentication module to be check this sign-in key before you say that it is a valid JWT token, right? So when we are saying we wanted sign-in key to be validated, we also need to say that what is my sign-in key. So this sign-in key is nothing but which helps, right? Which helps to you know mm, to generate the JWT token, right? And which will be part of it as well, right? So first of all, as having said that, let's go ahead and define the security key. So which will be in a provider controller. That means issuer controller. So I would say that JWT dot issuer. Let's say ish now. Okay, JWT issuer key, sign in key, right? So I say that JWT issuer sign in key is, it can be any string, so that you would require assume that it's going to be your secret key. Okay, I am giving a random characters for here, right? So this is going to be security key, no validation on that. So whatever key that you're going to keep it, right? So that will be fine, right? So this key I'm going to access it through our module, right? So public string, I say that, right? That's it. So I've defined it over here, right? So let's go ahead and take this. So having said that, we have section over here, correct? So all we need to do is app setting dot get, right? So get of what? App settings. So dot your JWT, right? So what it is saying, cannot convert from string to byte, right? So what you can do is, as since encoding, it is encoding. So I'll have to take the secret key from settings, right? So before that, I will refer to system.text in order to get the string converted into bytes, right? And so this is my JWT issuer secret key, right? So I'm going to do what? Encoding. Oh my god, it is so encoded. No. Encode. 1 second. Yes, it's encoding. So I'll see dot get bytes. So bytes from where? So our app settings. Dot get of app settings. Right. Dot or in key. Right. So this is where we got secret key taken from JWT. Sorry, taken from app settings. So where we have defined this one, right? Yeah. So now we'll have to define it over here, right? Yes. This is done. So this is how it looks. Our JWT configuration to our services, right? So yes. So now our application is ready with a JWT authorization, right? So let's go ahead now and see further implementation. So what needs to be done now? So now all we need to do is, uh, we are going to just have the new controller added, which is nothing but authentication controller, and have the method which can take the username and password as input, right? So then, and on when you see that the given credentials are exist in this table, identity.users table, so then you're going to say that sorry, you're going to do that the JWT generation for the client, right? So before that, see, I wanted to just uh, generate the entity framework code for the given existing database. To keep this short, I'm just going to generate entities within the same project, but in real time we would actually separate the entity entities from the actual API project, right? So we are going to keep independent project so that it'll be independent, right? So right, so I'll go and add a new folder. I say that entities, right? So now let's do the job. So in order to generate entity framework code for existing database, which is database first approach. So I'm going to use entity framework core power tools, which is a add-on over Microsoft Visual Studio. So this tool can be found on website, right? So you can install it. So entity framework core power tools, say that reverse engineer, right? So you give your connection strings. Say this is my connection string TD core. So you can add it if you don't exist, if you don't see your connection string exist, right? Click on OK. So you see that all the tables here. So as of now, I'm going to generate all the tables. So the tables which is displaying in the list. So if you have a primary key in the table defined, only then you can find enable option checkbox option here, right? If you don't define any primary key in the table, you definitely can't select the table to be generated, right? So right, let's go ahead and generate. Uh, so now I say that uh, TD core context, right, and say that namespace is JWT generation dot entity, right. So project path is nothing but entities where I wanted to generate my code over here, right. So entities and pluralize this thing, and we wanted to generate entities and DB context both, right. So entity types are nothing but it's a models which represents the table structure, right. It's a model. I can say Poco classes, and DB context is something which will hold the schema details about the tables, right. So you can refer to the entity framework basics for more information, but I'm going to generate the context here along with the entities, right. Right click done. Okay, generating code. Yes, it says that model generated successfully. So you see now, right, all the entities is nothing but our tables are generated, right. So all we are all interested about the user, correct. So this is what the user entity looks like, all our fields, and this is what the context which we can see, right. So the TD core context, and you see all the all these things, right. All our tables and schema related metadata, you can find it here. So now let's so now we have the entities, and we should say that uh, again, so again each and everything is loosely coupled here. So we have seen that whenever we need authentication, we say that yes, we need authentication, and we said that what is the dependency, and when we need app settings, right. So we said that we have defined the dependency. So in the same keeping same thing in mind, so entities we have generated, but again, so we have not incorporated these things with our application, right. So now we are going to say that, so this is my dependency, this is my DB context which I wanted to use in application, right. So in order to do that, we'll have to just add ASP.NET framework core entity framework, right. So how we can do that? Go ahead and right click on the project and say that manage new get packages. So now click on the browser tab. So what we are going to do is Microsoft entity framework core, right. So this is the library which going to offer, right, all the entity framework support over the ASP.NET Core Web API. So yes, let's see, we have installed 2.2.4, but it says that version conflict detected. Okay, so I think it might be compatible with what? Let's see now. It's already exists in the dependencies. NuGet, Microsoft.NET Core. What does it says? Where is the entity framework? .NET Core 2.1.1. So let's go ahead and install 2.1.1 itself. No worry about that. Do install. Right. So when you get this error, right, go ahead and check entity framework core, which is already exist, and make sure that you just be compliant with that version. Right. I have installed it. So what I'm going to do now? So we have installed, and so now we would actually need to say that what's my DB context using our services, correct? So before that, I wanted to just keep our connection string, right? So connection string, let's say that TD core. Oh, sorry, connection string, right? So I'm going to just take it from here. Right. So for now, I would say integrated security true, but it's be recommended with corresponding credentials in the real time, right? So this is my server and this is my DB, and I say that I wanted integrated security, right? TG core DB connection string, okay? So now what I would say is I have added setting over here and then go back and add it in the model as well so that you can access it in the application code, right? So to be maintain proper naming convention, let's give it TD as like this, and as well in the app settings, right? Yes. So now what we are going to do next? So we are going to say that we are going to add dependency services dot add db context, right? Db context of whom? Your context is nothing but this one, right? So copy the class name or you can type in directly td core context, right? So then import it, right? So this is a config. So when we are saying that, when we are saying this, that means I have a DB context from entity framework which I wanted to use in the application, right? So as we did it for JWT, each provider will have its own settings which you can use. So right. So let's go ahead and mention that settings. So yes. So config dot use SQL server. SQL. Okay. In order to do that before doing anything, so we would actually entity framework core namespace could need to be imported, right? Use SQL server. So we are going to connect the user, I mean SQL server, and before that, I would need it the connection string, right? So let's go ahead and take our app setting, right? So right. So this is the app settings model. So connection string we have defined in the JSON file, right? So we wanted 3 core DB connection string. So then server of server dot connection timeout is 300 milliseconds, right? So since it is a method, we wanted to just set timeout by calling it, right? So that's all we wanted to configure. So as and on your SQL server, maintenance, you may need to just configure a couple of things in real-time projects. But for now, this is the basic coupling with our application. So this is saying that add DB context, and this is my DB context which contains my metadata of what about database, and say that I'm going to use SQL server for that, and this is my connection string, and the connection timeout to the server is 300 milliseconds, right? So yes, uh, now everything is ready, right? Let's go ahead and see whether we can query the users table first. So before that, I wanted to uh, add controller, right? So let's say the controller is API controller which is empty, so we don't need any templates over here, uh, right? So the controller name is authentication, right? So auth controller, authentication controller, right? Add it. It's taking time to generate the code. Yes. Yeah, go ahead and configure. Yeah, it's okay. Yes. Now, since we wanted to check whether our entities can connect to our database and see whether it can pull the data, since we have configured everything clean, right? So I can go ahead and define the constructor. And in the constructor, what do we need? We need what? TD core context, right? So this is our DB context, correct? So we need to import appropriate namespace with nothing but generation entity entities, right? So we say that read only TD core context, right? Again, so you need to avoid as many as manual instantiation, right? You need to be maintained, the dependency injection, make use of that. So now you see that I'm not going to create any object to this, I'm not going to create any instance to this. So all I'm doing is I'm declaring it so that .NET Framework will actually supply instance of it because we have configured it in startup.cs, right? Right. So now let's, to be tested, let's go ahead and access it over here itself. So what's my entities? What's my entity? Users, right? Yeah, users. Users select, right? So add users, correct. Uh, not select. To list assume. Okay. So now, so this is the controller, right? Authentication. So let's go ahead and run. Yes, so we are going to call authentication, right? Yep, it's not calling. Yeah, get. Yes, so we'll have to define the get endpoint as in order to invoke the controller. So we will define this, right? So let's do that. For time being, I'm just keeping in order to check this. So you see this API slash controller. So that means with the control name, I should be able to call these endpoints, right? Yes, HKMO, yeah. Now, yes, you see this. We have got the record. So it is nothing but it is there in our table, correct? So that means we have successfully accessed a database and we should be able to fetch any data from the available tables, right? So we are good to go ahead and write the endpoint which can take user credentials and validate it, right? So yes, let's go ahead and do that. So how we can do that is something we need a model, right? So for that, we'll go and add class user cadence and user, I can say, right? Uh, user. So in that, I'm going to keep public string username right? Public string password, right? So I'm going to say that, yeah, so we need a user class which can actually accept credentials through user class module. So we would need, so on post credential validation, right? So we are going to just return the state of the, authentication. So for that, it is, mm, user session, I would call us. So two models we have added. So so I would call user authentication and says that is authenticated, right? So then I would say that string my token, right? Right. So these two models are going to have help in one way to accept credentials, user.cs and the user session.cs to return, the state of the authentication, right? So the response over the credentials, right? Given credentials. So now let's go back to controller. So before we proceeded, what's our dependencies? Let's figure out the dependencies. So one, we need a database in order to check the username and password, right? So to access user's table. So another dependency is, so while generating the JWT token, so we need the JWT class helpers, right? So as we discussed earlier, so we can find all JWT, corresponding helper classes in this tokens dot identity model. This identity model, right? This identity model dot tokens, then using system dot identity model dot tokens dot JWT, right? These two are the helpers, and we also need secret key, right, in order to generate JWT, right? So let's go ahead and take Microsoft extensions dot configuration, right? So we have seen that in the last session. So we can actually obtain settings. So we do need Microsoft extension dot options, right? So we have taken that IE options of app settings. We would need it so that we can take security key. We can rest security, right? So let's import the appropriate namespace. So it's going to be private read only and IE options of app settings, right? Options. Yes, options. Yes. So now, so what we are going to have. So now, what's my endpoint? We need to decide now what endpoint, and we are going to develop. So which can actually take credentials, right? So we are going to define. We are going to develop endpoint, which is a post HTTP post compatibility, right? HTTP post web compatibility, right? So let's go ahead and do that. You can see the example in the values controller of post, right? This is the post example, correct? So let's go ahead and copy. So to save some time, right? So you see that HTTP post, and from body, what I'm going to take from body user class, right? So user class, where it is, generation mod JWT dot user class, right? User. So that means from body, I wanted this model, right? This model, nothing but username and password, right? So now the basic thing, we are going to just keep try catch blocks for any. for anything. So what I'm going to return is I action result of user session, correct? So I action results comes from where? 1 second. Comes from I action result comes from Microsoft ASP.NET Core MVC. So this namespace is not added yet. So we may need to just add ASP.NET Core MVC using NuGet packages. One second. Sorry about that. And yes, so we are going to return I action returns. So it's a base contract for the any endpoint, right? So it would have the uh, it would have the basic execute result async. So right. So here I'm going to return what if it is HTTP status code. HTTP status codes. I'm going to return. So we would needed one more system.net, right? On error, we are going to return, HTTP status code uh, internal server error, right? Action result of really sorry about that. See, we are going to return, status code of what? HTTP status code dot internal server error and x dot message. Assume we wanted to just communicate just message, right? So what's the matter here? Cannot convert from status code to int. It's basically codes, right? Yep. So it's a couple of bad things coming. Status codes. Yep, it's clear. Find it status finder enter server error, which is nothing but our HTTP status codes and the message, right? Sorry about a couple of mistakes over here. Yes, so what I've done is, I've just kept the try catch block, and on error I'm saying that it's 500 internal server error, right? And message, right? So next we are going to do, so what? So since we have same name, so let's keep it the namespace to differentiate that. So we have entity name with the same class name. And yes, so now if in case if at all, if we are getting user object as null, so return status codes of, so I mean just to be straightforward, bad request, right? So when it is null, right, so it's going to be bad request, so that's why we are returning bad request, which is nothing but so you can see all the status codes here, right? Bad request will have 400 and 500 is for internal server error, right? So now we have a DB context, GDDB context, and users single or defaults. That means I wanted to just check user dot username dot equals of my user dot username and user dot password hashed password. Password hash dot equals of my user dot. Oh, what's happening? Oh, sorry. I'll keep it short here. U dot username, U dot username, right? So I say that I wanted to do this as like this task to be, I think here. So singular default where or let's put it in singular. Oh, yeah, what's user from table, right? Sorry. So this is what. So context and users table, we're going to get single or default. So this is our criteria. It has to match username and as well the password, right? So in case if this is not a null, right? So that means we do have record in the table. So all we need to do is we'll have to generate the JWT token. So basically saying that string generate JWT token. So user from table, we're going to get what? User, right? User. So let's say private it is. So since it is ambiguity, we'll have to define. So this time we need entities user, correct? Yes. So we would need user session rather than, So we are going to say that not where user session. Right. So we're going to return, right? Session dot is authenticated is true because on success of authentication we are generating token, right? So what we wanted is return OK of token session is this dot generate JWT token and user from table, right? So we are going to return session, right? Yep. Okay, so now we have everything set up, right? Let's else we wanted to return what? Status, internal server error, and say that could not generate, could not create session, right? Right, everything is set up and now all we need to do is still there is one warning, async method lacks a white operator and will synchronously. Yes, so what we can do is, so yes, we are saying that this method is asynchronized, but we are nowhere using async methods, right? Inside, so it's saying that since then it is going to be a synchronized method. So we can use entity framework core. So now it is right, right? Yes. Now if everything is set, now you say that what we are going to do, and you can say that user null. We are saying it's bad request, and then if it is not null, so we are going by username and password to match in the rows that is exist in the users table, and right. So we are expecting for a record to be written, and if the record is not null, that means to be that the record exists in the table, and we are good to generate the JWT token. Usually we actually maintain the services, separate services to write these kind of logics, to maintain them independent logics in real time projects. But I'm just to keep in a shorten in this session, I'm just writing same method over here in order to generate JWT token, right? So let's go ahead and write the code which can generate JWT token for us, right? Let's go ahead. So now what we are going to do as a first step, so we will have to create a instance for JWT token creator, right? So it's a token handler. So new JWT security token handler, right? So since we are going to create a security token, so this is the class which can actually create the token for us, right? So this is the, since it is as I said that this is the class which can actually generate the token, correct? So if you want to generate a token, so we need to just actually form a data, so that which needs to be part of the JWT token. So what's going to be part of the JWT token? So before that, so let me go ahead and tell you JWT token structure, right? So JWT consists of three sections, right? Three sections. One is headers, right? Another one is payload. The last one is signature, right? So headers are nothing but it's going to tell which algo, which algorithm is, which algorithm type the token is going to use. Payload is going to talk about the user and his authorization, right? His or authorization, the person authorization, claims, right? So signature is nothing but our security token, secret signature, which depends on our secret tokens. It consists this, right? So before we generate token, so that means we need to just say that what algorithm type we are going to use, and what is the user data that you wanted to uh, keep it in the payload, right? And what is the signature of it, right? So let's do that job and go ahead. So in order to that, so token descriptor, I'm saying that this is token descriptor, new security token descriptor. Oh, yeah. Descriptor. Sorry about that. Token descriptor. Yep. Yes, this is the model. So this, to be straightforward, this is the model where we are saying that what's my header, what's my payload, no, what's my signature going to be, right? So now if I say that first subject, right? So it consists of subject, which we are saying that it's a claims identity, right? So let's go ahead and import system.security.claims namespace, right? So claims identity is nothing but your identity of the user. Okay, new claim, right? So subject is New climb. In the climb, I'm going to say that new climb of what? So we'll have climb types, default climb types, which is nothing but it's all about the user information. What type of information you wanted to just keep it in the payload. Okay, it's all about the payload, right? So I'm saying that I want to keep username, right? So where is my user name? So user dot username, here it is, right? So this is my username. So basically it can be identity of your user, right? So I'm keeping my username here, or you can keep user ID also, so which is in a string form, right? So next I want to say that when is my expiry, not my expiry, sorry, when is my token expiry? So it is, sorry, date time dot UTC now, say that add minutes, let's keep it for short, 30 minutes, okay. So now sign in credentials, and we need to keep it. So new signing in credentials of, yes, here you go. It's asking for the key and algorithm, right? So we know where the key is going to be, correct? So my key is nothing but encoding, again same encoding, import the system.text as and get bytes from where? So from options dot value dot JW security token, right? So this is my key, right? What algorithm we are going to use? So we have some standard algorithms to generate JW tokens. So now we'll go by security algorithms, where you can see algorithms. So you can get to know about basics on this, right? So we are going to use HMA SHA 256 signature. Okay. So where's my key? Why it's saying it's not? Yep. So we need to just instantiate symmetric system symmetric key, right? It's asking for system symmetric key form, right? So this is what our token module, right? So you can actually pass claims like a role, what is role, and what is you know what is his permissions, all that you can pass by creating new claim and claim types, right? You can create a custom claim types are also apart from these. You can see all these are the claim types, right? So apart from this, you can create your own claims. So when you create your custom claims, so you will need to handle everywhere accordingly, right? So for this is available data fields, right? So let's now generate the token, right? So I say that my session dot token equal to, let's say where token equal to, who is the token generator? Token handler, right? So in this create token of, what's my token descriptor? Token descriptor, right? So we have a token handy now. So what we have to do is string dot, our token is a string form, hence what we are going to do is token handler. So write token, right? So write token, it is nothing but which can actually generate the token in a JSON form, this which is stringified, right? So yes, so we have a token here. So now everything is set, and let's go ahead and see how it works. So now we have a post method, right? So we can actually accept username and password. So let's get rid this sample function, right? So now to do that, I'm taking postman, right? So the question is how we can actually post credentials to that, right? So I'm going to just show you how you can actually post your credentials to the API. right? So yes, add it. So what's my method? Post method, correct? So let's run the web API first. Right. So now my API is up and running. So what's my URL? Over here, this is my URL, right? This is my resource. Authentication is the resource. So since it is a post, I want to say is what's my post type? So username, right? So what's my username? Dadam TR. What's my password? It's test. 10 I guess. Yeah. So beautify. What's problem with this? Because of this. Yep. It's beautify. So it can actually format the things. Yes. So yeah. This is how. And let's go ahead and see. Send it. Yes. You see that. See that you got password and doesn't has been posted, and now it is going to query. So yes, you see this. I got the user. Got the user because my password and username pretty much is matched. So now it is not a null. I'll go ahead and see that this is my user record, right? So now I will create an object for user session and say that is authenticated true, and I'm going to create. I'm going to get the secret key, right? This is my bytes of secret key, and yes, yes, yes. See, look at this. We've got. You see this? What's that? You can go and see. See, you got the token. You see that? Yes, this is how your token looks like. This is a JW token. So now, uh, let's go ahead and uh, let's go ahead and see how it looks like, what data it contains after generating, right? So jwt.io is something which can actually decode it, right? So we have encoded token, correct? So you can see this now. What's the decoded data part of this particular JW token, right? So algorithm HS256. So I told you headers about all algorithm types, right? So unique name is nothing but your username, and this is the expiration date, right? So now this is going to be your signature. So this is your secret, right? Secret key 256-bit secret key, right? Uh, so as though it says invalid signature, again we'll talk about that later. And right, yes, algorithm is SSHS256. So finally, we could actually generate the JW token, right? So now, since we said that it is a protective endpoints that I'm going to use it. So if I see values controller, so by default I'm able to access this, right? So let's see how we can protect this, right? So in order to protect any endpoints in a controller level, you can say authorize. Sorry about that. Authorize, right? So if you want to keep it for method wise, you can say it here authorize, right? Authorize. So now if I run it directly now, so will my API allow me to just get this value 1, value 2 results over values controller? Let's see that. Yep. You see this, you got that. Page is not working. You were getting earlier the values were returning whenever you ran the application. You were getting value 1, value 2, which is default endpoint of the controller. And so now it is not, because you see this, it is unauthorized. You see this error, HTTP error 401. 401 stands for unauthorized. That means our authentication system is working. So that means unless you pass JWT token along with your API request, system would not actually process your API request, right? So it says that HTTP error 401. That's how we can protect our API endpoints from outside the world, from unknown access, right? But there will be a question. So how how uh, how I'm able to just post the credentials to the same point, right? So that can obviously a question might be in your mind. So you see this, we are not protected this controller, right? So since we have not protected this controller, so it is allowing any request and processing it, right? That's what we wanted, because we wanted to accept credentials from anybody, right? And on top of that, we were going to validate that credentials to give them a JWT token, right? Which is a token for them to access our rest of the API endpoints.